Well, we always love talking to our good friend Ken Coleman, Ramsey personality, host of the Ken Coleman Show, joining us on 95.7 FM KCMO and streaming on a Monday on the KCMO Talk Radio app. In a prior life, Ken did do more news, politics, so he's got the pulse and everything happening. Of course, now he's a career expert for the Ramsey team. But Ken, I'm just going to let the audience know that you predicted the outcome last Tuesday when you and I exchanged texts about, 8-9 days ago?
That's correct. I was feeling pretty good about my prediction, and so I shot it to you. Yeah. And it came true. Yeah. Turns out I was paying good attention.
You had the pulse, as you always do there with the Ken Coleman Show. So now that Donald Trump has won, Ken, and you're a guy who obviously was just on, I saw you on Fox Business the other day talking about what Donald Trump should be doing. Where do you want to see him go when it comes to economic policy to help regular folks in this country?
Well, I certainly hope that the tax cuts are extended, the Trump tax cuts, which are scheduled to expire after 2025. I think you'll see that legislative agenda go. So I think extending the tax cuts are good. I'm always for tax cuts. Less taxes is always good for the American people. And I hope to see that he will move forward on deregulation. We need to remove as much regulation as possible. I mean, everything possible on American businesses. That's small, medium, and large. Let's get government regulations out of business. And let's reduce costs for businesses is what I'm getting at here. Because when you reduce costs for businesses, we're going to reduce costs for consumers. And, the reason I felt like this was going to be a Trump blowout is what I texted you, and I posted it on social. And that is that elections are decided when the electorate big decisions or big margins, should I say, are either about fear or hope. And while the pollsters are wrong, there was one piece of data that was right, and I kept paying attention to it. It was that 70% of Americans were not happy with the direction of the country. Now, there's immigration, social, and cultural issues there, but the driving force was the cost of living and how it had gone up so much in 4 years. So I say all that to say that it was obvious to me, and he brought a coalition together we've never seen before. It's because people were afraid of where the Democrat agenda was going to take them financially. And so Trump needs to now take that mandate and lower costs for consumers. That ought to be his number one agenda. And so to that end, I said on Fox, John Roberts didn't like it. I was on Fox News with he and Sandra, but I think his idea of tariffs are bad. Tariffs are taxes on businesses, and I don't think they should be used right now. I don't think it's necessary. I think that's an inflationary move. So I hope that he was just rattling the saber and he doesn't impose tariffs.
Well, how much of that did we see during Donald Trump's first 4 years where he says something really as a negotiating tactic, right, to kind of get the deal that he wants? I mean, I'm hopeful, too, that that's part of the broader plan here. Because at this point, I don't see the American people wanting to go into a high tariff environment.
No. I mean, if you really understand what tariffs are, I think most people forget what they are. But simply put, the idea is it is a tax on imports, and it's meant to punish, foreign countries. But the reality is that until you make it more cost effective or put incentives to do American first products, which we just don't have that environment right now, American companies are still going to have to go get imports. And so then those costs actually, they are a tax on American companies, and then they pass those costs on to us. So we are not in an environment where we need tariffs. So I think if he were to focus on deregulation. The other thing I would say is he talked a lot about in his campaign about energy. I'm all for him doing whatever he can to bring down energy costs. That affects everybody. When you start bringing down energy costs, you see those savings passed out to everybody in the country. So those moves would be very good as well. And I will tell you, Pete, you and I, we talk about this stuff from time to time, consumer confidence. We see this in all these economic reports. This is just a plain old way of saying psychology. And the psychology of the American people right now needs to be boosted. They need to feel hopeful. So it'll be interesting to see if Trump can do that in the first 90 days.
Ken Coleman, Ramsey personalities here on KCMO Talk Radio 95.7 FM. Of course, also the host of the Ken Coleman Show. Find it wherever you get your podcasts. Now, what about the border crisis? I know that is obviously not a direct economic issue, but it does and it will have an impact on the economy and, how this country hopefully gets back to a high growth place to begin with. So what should that look like and how should that be thought about through the prism of what's best for the American economy, Ken?
Yeah, I think the idea of spending billions and billions and billions of dollars rounding people up and sending them back home, I think that's a little bit unrealistic. Would I like to see that happen? Yeah, as an American citizen, sure. But I think what really needs to be the focus is to close the wall. It's got to be done. It never was finished. It needs to be finished. There needs to be a real crackdown on the sieve that is just allowing people in, and there will be an economic impact on that. There's no question about that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's you're going to if you were to round everybody up, there'd be a massive impact. I don't think that's going to happen, so I don't think it's going to be as big as people think. But Pete, look, it comes time now that we've got to stop the border. We got to close the border, and I will tell you this. If I were president, I would be seriously building a relationship with the Mexican government because they are the partner that we must have. There's got to be a deal put in place to not only close the border, but we've got to stop the sex trafficking, the fentanyl. I mean, there needs to be a full-out war on the cartel.
Well,
they're right there.
And don't forget when we had a better relationship during Donald Trump's years in office, it was also getting Mexico to shut off their southern border, Ken. I mean, that was a huge part of the policy.
That's right.
That worked very effectively. But I will disagree with you. I think it's time to round up people who have committed violent crimes and get them the hell out of here. But that I know.
I agree. I agree we should. I'm just asking you, how feasible do you think that is?
Yeah, well, that's why you got people like Tom Homan and Elon Musk and Donald Trump to figure that part out.
Yeah.
But, no,
get them out. I agree.
Because here's the thing.
This mass rounding is impossible.
Well, yes, I agree. I do think that that is going to be very difficult. But if you have people who are on watch lists who have committed violent crimes, they have got to be out as soon as possible. And I don't know. I also don't think there's a price you can pay or price you can put on safety of the American people.
Well, yes. I mean, I think philosophically, yes. But at the same time, this blank check, I don't know that's the way to go about it. What I would say is let's come up with a very comprehensive plan. Let's make sure that we know what we're doing. Because here's what happens, and you agree with me on this. When you just say you give a blank check to a government agency and there's no checks and balances, then the thing can get out of control. I want to see some effective I want to see some effective strategies here, and then we scale up. Why don't we just start doing things the way the private sector does? That's the point I'm making.
Well, I agree.
I don't want to just throw money at it.
Yes.
Let's go. All right, let's say we're going to take the state of Texas, and we've got the watch list. Let's go clean house methodically. Let's work with the state of Texas. Let's put a plan in place, and let's prove out a very effective plan that is cost effective and worth every penny that we're spending on it, not just throw a bunch of money at it. I think that's the fine point I'm making.
Mm-hmm. No, and I agree with you there. Now, let me ask you, speaking of having the government run more like the private sector, Elon Musk has taken a lot of crap. But I feel like one of the problems we have in America right now, Ken, is we don't celebrate the people who actually are geniuses and are doing great work to make lives better for everyday Americans. And Elon Musk, whether you like him or you can't stand his politics, does that. Shouldn't we want more people like Elon Musk involved with the federal government, willing to figure out ways to streamline things and make it more cost-effective for the American people?
Yes. And the reason is, just imagine Elon walking into a government agency and spending a day shadowing operations. You're telling me his head's not going to spin off 17 times watching the ineffectiveness? This is a guy who innovates, without even trying to innovate. Absolutely, it's good to get private sector people in there who are used to making things happen quickly and effectively and excellently. I mean, are you kidding me right now? Yeah, because if we were to walk in and you and I were just walking to a government agency, our blood pressure would be through the roof watching how things operate. So yes, There's no question we need business brains getting involved, people from outside the Beltway. I think the greatest thing that Trump could do, or any president could do right now, is put a cabinet together of people who have never served a day in government. Some people go, oh, Ken, they would not know what they're doing. You got to give me a break. Of course they would know what they're doing. They would laugh at all the ways that things get done now, and they would start getting things done. And I think he's got a chance to appoint a cabinet that would be completely from outside the Beltway, and I hope he does.
Yeah, absolutely. And don't forget, I think he slashed half of the jobs at Twitter when he took it over, and it was a little clunky, but I use X all the time. It runs just as good as it did when, there were twice as many employees there. I can't imagine that there are bureaucracies that could operate the same way.
Here's one for you, Pete. I can't believe I'm saying this. These words are going to come out of my mouth right now, but I'm excited for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to get involved in making America healthy again. I got to tell you.
Yes.
I'm no liberal and I don't vote for libs, but boy, oh boy, he's got my vote of confidence right now on what he says about America's health. I really think this is an interesting time. I hope they let him run wild and he really challenges the process up there.
I am so glad you hit on that, Ken. I could not agree more. And this is what Donald Trump is doing with guys like RFK, and this is what smart business people do. You play to their strengths, right? He said to RFK, he said it publicly, you ain't touching the oil. We're not doing your green energy craziness. But you know what? You want to help make America healthy again? That's your bread and butter. And that's what smart leaders do. They put their people in positions to win based on their strengths.
Yeah, I think that would be brilliant and very much looking forward to seeing that. And I think that, what the American people will also take great joy in is that's going to be another outsider. Even though he's the ultimate insider, he's an outsider in that particular part of the world. And, boy, to come in and shake things up, I think that'll be great.
I totally agree. Hey, Ken, it's always fun. It is lively, and we so appreciate you and the Ken Coleman Show. And listen, if you need help with anything on the career side, Ken's got all the books. I've read them all from Paycheck to Purpose, and you can get those at RamseySolutions.com. Keep it up, my man. We really appreciate you hopping on.
Thanks, Pete. Always enjoy it.
All right. Ken Coleman, he's the best.